Welcome back to the shop, my friend. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's build video I have another foam pumpkin project. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I took a regular craft store foam pumpkin and turned it into a custom mask for my daughter. Now the thing that's great about these foam pumpkins is that they are extremely easy to work with. I have multiple videos on my channel where I show how to cut into these and to manipulate them. You can obviously tell with this particular one, I added some foam clay to the surface just to up that detail, and I gave it a movable lower jaw. I went a little overboard with this one. You could definitely make one of these masks and not have to go this elaborate. Basically, this video is out there to inspire. I want you guys to see this project and make something your own. So I want to show you what it takes to take one of these foam pumpkins, make it into a custom mask. Let's go ahead and get started. For my mask, I picked up one of the larger pumpkins from Walmart, and I'm going to use one of the templates that I created a couple years ago. But with your project, feel free to create your own unique design. Now the thing to take note is where the top of the head is going to line up on the inside of the pumpkin, and where that's going to line up with your eyes. I trace around the template with my pencil, and I press just hard enough to mark the surface. To carve the foam pumpkin, I'm going to be using a scalpel blade on my heat tool, and because I'm cutting foam, I'm making sure to wear my respirator. Once the heat tool had reached optimal temperature, the process is easy. It's just following the lines that I'd traced on. And if your cuts aren't perfect, it's not a big deal. Either cut away a little bit more, or just leave that as your final design. Now the cuts you're seeing me do here are 3 times normal speed, so the thing with this is just go slow and steady. Let the heat and the knife do the work. At this point, I wasn't really sure how the mask was going to fit, so my main goal here was just to detach the top from the bottom. Once the top had been cut free, I can then sketch out exactly where I wanted more of the mask to be trimmed away. Now notice I'm leaving a small rounded area at the bottom of the jawline. This is going to help the lower part of the mask pivot. Now I can go ahead and sketch on the basic shape of the lower jaw, making sure to cut it in on the bottom to leave room for her neck. The heat tool is once again used to cut this free, and notice just like the top, I have extended sections on the sides. These are going to overlap, which is going to allow the bottom jaw to move. To allow the lower jaw to pivot, I'm going to be using some 3/4 inch Chicago screws. Holes are drilled into the sides of the mask just big enough for the screw post to fit in. Once the post had been pressed into place, the screw could then be tightened. And here you can see just how that lower jaw will move. Now the interior of the pumpkin had a different thickness on this side, so I used my rotary tool to take away some of the material. Once I had the wall down to a 3/4 inch depth, the other posts could be put in and secured into place. I'm going to be using foam clay to add additional textures to this surface. Now this isn't something you have to do, you could leave the mask just like this, but I just want to up that level of detail. So I go ahead and I wet the surface of the pumpkin, which allows the foam clay to stick to it. Just like you've seen me do before, I start by applying the foam clay and smoothing it out with my fingers, but I'll eventually switch over to a silicone tip tool to get more definition. With foam clay being a very additive material to sculpt with, I find it easier to make tubes out of the foam clay and then apply that to the material that's already on the surface. Using some additional water, these can easily be smoothed out and blended in. Remember, foam clay needs to dry for 24 to 48 hours before you can really sculpt into it. Also, if you wanted to build up additional layers on top of this, go ahead and let that dry and then add those the next day. After about a day, the foam clay has skinned over, and now I'm going to use a stone bit on my rotary tool. This is going to allow me to carve into the surface so I could give this face a little more depth and detail. I can also use the stone bit to give some additional definition to the stem. To seal the foam clay, I'm going to be painting on some Flex Bond. Now you could also use some Mod Podge, PVA glue, Plasti Dip. This is just sealing the surface of the foam clay so it accepts paint better. Using a damp paper towel, I dab the surface to get rid of any brush strokes, and then I use a hair dryer to speed up the dry time. Once the surface was dry, I can now spray on my base layer of color, which I'm going to use some Valspar Orange. To dirty the mask up, I'm going to make a wash using some Liquitex Raw Umber and Mars Black. This mixture is applied all over the surface using a mop brush, and then a damp paper towel is used to wipe away a lot of the excess paint. The great thing about this wash is it seeps down into all the details and it slightly darkens the overall surface. I then add a dusting of black primer around the eyes and the mouth. Liquitex Cadmium Orange is going to make up the main highlights on this pumpkin's face. I'm going to apply the paint to the surface with a mop brush, but I'm not going to add any water because I want it to just hit the highlights. For layer 2, more paint is added to certain areas, primarily focusing on the teeth and the eyebrows. Like I'd mentioned in some of my other painting videos, I really try to focus on the light source and where it would be on this mask. So if I'm going to have more light from above, I want to add more paint there to highlight those areas. At this point, you could actually stop here. All you'd have to do is add some straps and your mask would be complete. But I'm going to push this design a little bit further. I'm going to add some raffia for hair. This material can be found at pretty much any craft store in the fake flower area. So at the top of my pumpkin mask, I drill a whole bunch of holes around the stem. A couple of strands of the material are cut off and then twisted together and then inserted into the hole. I use my Surebonder hot glue gun to then secure it on the underside. This process can then be repeated again and again all the way around the top of the mask. Now this process did take a decent amount of time, but I think the overall effect in the end looks really cool. The only problem I have with it is that it's just a little too clean. So I use the same wash that I put on the mask on the hair as well. The wash does a great job just staining the hair a little bit so it doesn't look quite as clean. With all the hair in place, the top of the mask was just a little too bright, so I went ahead and added an additional wash. And this is a process you can do as many times as you want until you get that level of grunge that you're going for. I decided I wanted to black out the eyes and the nose using some chiffon fabric. This material is cut to length and then hot glued into place. Here you can see how the eyes are covered so you can see out but no one can see in. After the eyes are complete, I could then add a little bit more material for the nose. To make the mask more comfortable to wear, I'm going to add a couple of strips of upholstery foam to the top. These are going to be hot glued into place and will cover the strands of the hair on the interior. To make the mask adjustable and wearable, I'm going to be using some 3/4 inch elastic and tri-glides. 2 strips of elastic are cut to about 10 inches in length, and then the tri-glides are hot glued on either end. Once the hot glue is set up, the elastic can then be woven through the tri-glide on the opposite side. This is a really simple way to make the mask adjustable for various head sizes. The straps can now be glued to either side of the interior, slightly above the eyes. Since the jaw is movable, I cut some small strips of elastic that are going to go on the inside. This is going to help the jaw close. These strips are going to be hot glued a couple inches in from the Chicago screws. Some more hot glue is also placed on top as an additional reinforcement. It doesn't need a ton of resistance for this process, it's just enough to help the jaw close on its own. So y'all can see how I took a regular foam pumpkin and made my own custom mask. And hopefully videos like this are inspirational. It makes you want to go out, grab one of these pumpkins, and make something your own. And if you are building any of my builds or utilizing some HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build something spooky.